And joining us right now on the Rothman Orthopedics guest line, you know him, you love him. Some, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs still fear this man. He's a many-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion from NBC Sports Philadelphia, pre- and post-game analyst, as well as the Seth Joyner show across all social media platforms, the great Seth Joyner. Seth, how are you, my friend?
I'm awesome, Farzy. How you been, man?
I've been fantastic. I really have, man. It's great to see you. You look great. I've been watching you on Eagles pregame, taking care of business on NBC Sports Philly. I, of course, miss hosting the epic blockbuster show we used to do called Endgame. That with you, me, and Barrett, we just had ourselves a time, my friend. But in all seriousness, I know this always comes up. Do you want to get involved in coaching? People always, whenever they see a great Seth Joyner rant, they're always like, you should be the defensive coordinator. You should be coaching this Eagles team. You're an Eagles Hall of Famer at the linebacker position. Do you want to get into coaching one day?
Well, listen, I've done an NFL intern. I just turned down a D3 job back in the fall. A school wanted me to come on board. The particulars weren't right, so I was definitely considering that. And I'm having some conversations right now, potentially about some of these spring leagues, either this year or next year. So I'm definitely interested, but the situation has to be right. I learned that during my internship in Buffalo is that you better be with a group of guys that you like. You better be with a group of guys that think like you think, whose objectives are the same, and more importantly, guys, that are loyal to the cause, and the cause is winning and helping these young guys get better as football players.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it is? And I know it's not just the Eagles. There's a bunch of other teams that really don't invest in the position of linebacker. Why do you think the NFL has gotten away from that position?
Well, I think, you've got that same position on the offensive side of the ball as the running back. I think that, these GMs, based upon what the analytics say, that, hey, you can find a good running back in multiple rounds. And that's true. You can find a good linebacker, some say, in later rounds. To a certain extent, that's true. But I also believe that, playmaking linebackers and playmaking running backs are guys that are worthy of being drafted early. Especially, when you talk about it from a defensive perspective, it's not like, back when I played, you either played a 30 front where you had 4 linebackers on the field, or you played, a 40 front where you had 3 linebackers on the field. In today's, defense, more times than not, you're going to be playing a 4-2 front, 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers. And if teams really want to create mismatches, they almost force your hands and make you play dime. That means you only got 1 linebacker on the field. So in running situations, if you don't have 6 guys in the box, you're 5-on-5. So that linebacker better be a damn hell raiser. If he ain't raising hell, then you got problems. And this is the problem I think that most organizations run into, is they think they can piecemeal it because, you play these, you got nickel packages, you got dime packages, you got, I don't know what they call it today, but, we had a package where, we had 7 DBs. So when you're doing that, now the chess game begins between offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators based upon personnel groupings and how you want to attack that. But I just think that the linebacker position is even that much more important now because they're involved. They're tied to the run game, so they're part of the front 7, but they're also intrinsically tied to the back 9 as far as coverage is concerned. And if you look at teams who had success, who had good defenses, impactful defenses, they got linebackers. They got linebackers that can play. Look at the 2 guys in Tampa. Look at Luke Kuechly over his career. Look at a guy like Ray Lewis over his career. Look at, Bobby Wagner right now. When you look at the better defenses in the NFL, they've got at least 1 hellraiser in the middle. They don't try to piecemeal it. They go get a guy who's the quarterback of the defense, and he runs the show.
It was a perfect time to pass this little note along. I had Gary Cobb, G. Cobb himself, on the show last week, and we were talking about something similar, and he said, if you needed a man that could do it all, it was Seth Joyner. Unprovoked Seth. I didn't mention you. He just said if he wanted a guy that could do it all, the best to ever do it was Seth Joyner. So I just wanted to pass that along to you.
Well, listen, let me tell you something. I couldn't ask for a better mentor when I got to the Eagles, and that was G. Cobb. I mean, he took the young guys under his wing and taught us how to be professionals. And a lot of my success I attributed to, the 2 to 3 years that I had to spend with him. When I came in, I had a skill set, but there were some things that I didn't do well. And one of the things he taught me, he was like, hey, some guys are really good at one thing. He said, but the more you can do, the more valuable you are. So if you're good at playing the run, but you can't pass rush, you better go and find somebody to teach you how to rush the darn passer. If you're good at rushing the passer and you're good at playing the run, and you're not that good, in coverage, whether it's man-to-man or zone, you go and make your weakness a strength. And if you can make your weakness a strength and not focus on what your strengths are so much, because you're good at what you're strong at, the weaknesses are what teams attack, and to that point, when you watch football now, these offensive coordinators that are supposed to be so smart and such gurus, they're attacking the technical and fundamental inefficiencies of players today as much as they are attacking teams schematically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. For all the young players, just listen to that soundbite right there and just live by that, and you'll turn out okay. That brings me to Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles' current defensive coordinator, who apparently has 3 other interviews that he's got lined up to be a head coach. He said earlier in the season he doesn't have a scheme, then kind of retracted that later in the season, said, of course I have a scheme, and this is but this is my philosophy, right? What did you draw from whatever Jonathan Gannon's scheme or philosophy was throughout the season?
Well, I think that he said earlier in the year that, they were pretty much an offense that, they ran a shell offense. In other words, they didn't want to get beat deep, so they wanted to keep everything in front of them, and they didn't want to take any chances of giving up big plays. And they were one of the top teams in the NFL at not giving up big plays. The problem was, when you played against elite level quarterbacks that were willing to take what you gave just to keep possessions going and scoring opportunities alive, it turned out to be, a death knell for him. Now, people think that my mindset is along the lines of one James David Buddy Ryan, and my aggression, I couldn't have played for, there was not a coach that was suited more for my skill set than Buddy Ryan. Okay. But there were times when Buddy was a little overzealous and a little over aggressive. When we had Bud Carson, he was a little more tempered in how he brought pressure. But we were certainly still a pressure defense. Now, I get it. The rules are in favor of the offense. The defenses are at a deficit, if you will. But you cannot play defensive football in the NFL, particularly against elite level quarterbacks in a passive way like Jonathan Gannon did all of this season. I think there was one point in time during this season, he had like a 14% blitz rate. So you're only going to blitz 14% of the time. And I don't care how good your defensive front is. If you want to talk about defensive fronts, look at the Chicago Bears. They had a phenomenal defensive front. They blitzed. Look at our defensive front. We had 5 guys on our defensive front that were phenomenal. We still blitzed, because the game of defensive football in the NFL is about pressure.
You're talking about your defensive
Yes.
lineman. Yeah.
Yes.
But Reggie and those guys, yeah.
We still blitzed.
Right.
We still blitzed. I mean, in my 8 years in Philadelphia, I had 38 sacks, 37 sacks, something like that. Okay. So it's not because Farzy, it's not because we didn't blitz. I got a lot of those sacks because I was rushing the passer, So to sit back in zone and bend with the mentality to bend but don't break, I don't understand that.
Okay.
Because at some point in time during the game, you have to get aggressive. You got to come and get these quarterbacks. You got to speed up their clock. You got to pressure them. And you got to put them in situations where, you hurry them into making mistakes.
Now, the counter argument to, and I want to see all the things that you're saying, and I was rooting for it all year to actually finally see it, and we really didn't. With the personnel this Eagles team had, were they good enough to get that pressure going on a quarterback?
Hey, listen, Darius Slay made the Pro Bowl. If Avonte Maddox had any kind of statistics the year that he had, like 4 or 5 picks, a couple of forced fumbles, a couple of recovery, I mean, any kind of statistics, he would have been in the running for the Pro Bowl. That's how well he played. Now, the weak link, one would say, maybe one Steven Nelson, rather. But even at that, at some point in time, you got to tell your guys, hey, bear down. You can't play afraid. You can't, as a coordinator, you can't be afraid to make calls sometimes because you're worried about a guy. Sometimes you got to empower that guy with the confidence to go out there and get it done, because every defense and every offense, it takes on the personality of the coach, whether you're talking about the OC or the DC. So if my DC is calling a passive game, guess what that does to me as a player? It makes me passive. If you want aggressiveness out of your players, then put them in an aggressive posture, then they will respond in like ways. So, I mean, I see Darius Slay at times, he's out there on the corner and he wants to get up and jam the guy. But in his mind, the defense coordinator's mindset is, oh, don't get beat deep, So instead of getting up and just getting in the guy's grill, he's kind of in between, kind of indecisive, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. Where we're in those games in the middle of the season when they were a little more aggressive against teams, that they knew didn't have much. You seen Darius Slay just go on a run, a run of big plays, turnovers, pick sixes, all of these things. They are a result of being aggressive. And to me, Jonathan Gannon is just not aggressive. I don't know, to be honest with you, Farzy, how much is really in that playbook. I know that our playbook was like that. Our game plan may be like that, but our playbook was like that. And you're responsible for all of it at all times. We wondered about Chip Kelly and his single sheet of paper, and how many plays could you possibly have on that little sheet of paper when Andy Reid has got this, this big old sheet,
the menu
filled up on both sides. And then I look at Jonathan Gannon every single game. He's got a sheet like this with a little bit of writing on the front of here, and he's looking like this. So there's nothing inside of it. So how much variety and how much creativity could really be in your playbook, when you've got a play sheet that looks like that, Now it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a whole lot on there, but I'm looking at coverages, I'm looking at blitzes, I'm looking at fronts, and I can tell you they got 3 fronts: a 3-man front, a 5-man front, and a 4-man front. They got like 2 or 3 blitzes. They're gonna bring a slot blitz, a linebacker blitz, and how many coverages? They're in zone, they got man, and every once in a while you might catch them in cover in quarters coverage or quarters halves, So if you're that simplistic in what you're presenting, because either A, your players can't run it, can't memorize it, or you as a coordinator don't have much variety, how much success can you have? So when I see a guy like this that's going to be getting 3 head coaching, interviews, and I'm scratching my head like, how? Oh, the defense was ranked, number 5 at one point, yeah. What were they ranked, in the first 7 games of the year? The second half of the year, most of your wins came against teams that were probably a combined 60 and 100, So, yeah, you beat up on the Sisters of the Poor, but you couldn't do anything against the good teams. And you mean to tell me that there's an organization that's looking at this guy to come in and be a head coach? That blows my mind. I'm like, I need to hurry up and get my ass in the league as a coach.
Yes, please. Let's go with that. No, in all seriousness, I feel like somebody just anointed him a chosen one, because everyone was talking about how great a defensive coordinator he was going to be. And everybody supposedly wanted him. I heard Joe Banner talking about how much he wanted. Every team in the league wanted Jonathan Gannon as their defensive coordinator. And then all of a sudden, just a year later, after a mediocre season, I know, like you said, the numbers ended well. After a mediocre season, oh, no, we got to get this guy as a head coach. 3 head coaching interviews. It doesn't make any sense to me. I do want to get this from you here because I'm asking everybody this question, and of course it has to do with the quarterback of the Eagles. Who is Jalen Hurts to you, Seth Joyner, and who do you think he is to the Eagles? Is he the guy that's earned next year as the starter? Is he the franchise guy? Or is he a guy that they're immediately going to try to replace? What is he to you?
I think he is a guy who deserves to come back for another year. But as you go into training camp next year, you want to bring in a veteran to challenge him. I don't think that, what we saw, throughout the year warrants you just giving him the job. Although I believe that he'd win it no matter, what second tier quarterback you bring in, even if it's Gardner Minshew. I think anybody with any kind of football smarts can look at that situation and see who the better quarterback is. Now, did Gardner Minshew come in and have a phenomenal game against the Jets? Absolutely. But it was the Jets. Okay.
Right.
I think that he's growing as a quarterback. I think that, you got to realize this kid has been in 4 different systems in the last 4 different years of his career. He's learning how to play the game at the pro level. And for a lot of young quarterbacks, that's hard to do. And then you thrust them into the playoffs. And one of the most detrimental things I think I heard from Nick Sirianni last week was, we just want to treat it like it's a regular game. Like, don't get too high, don't get too low. Well, see, that proved to me the inexperience of understanding the moment as far as Nick Sirianni was concerned. Because when you go from preseason to the regular season, the intensity goes up 15 to 20%. When you go from the regular season into the postseason, that intensity goes up another 20 to 25%. Okay. And the teams that have been there and done that, they know how to turn it up. Okay. So when you look at, Jalen Hurts for his first time, Kyler Murray for his first time, when you look at Mac Jones for his first time, these guys were clearly shook. These guys were in a state of shock when they realized how much more intense a playoff game would be and how much faster everything was happening and how pressurized the situation actually was. So now, not only were you speeding up their clock, but you sped up their fundamentals, you sped up their mechanics, you sped up everything, and they look like not either one of those quarterbacks looked like they had any business being in the NFL if you watch those 3 games. Okay. So now it's a great learning experience, not only for Jalen Hurts, but for every young player, to understand that the playoffs is a different animal. Okay. It's win or go home. You don't get to come back next week and try to get it right and fix it, and rectify the situation next week. Next week is next September. Okay. That's when the next opportunity you'll have. So when you're coaching a young player, the mindset has to be, okay, how do I get him to get his intensity at a certain level to play at that level all the time? Now, Jalen Hurts knows that, the level that I played at during the season, if I get into the playoffs, it's a different level. Now, the trick is, how do I get him to play at that level all the time, whether it's the preseason, regular season, or postseason? And then obviously, there's, Farzy, there's a lot of work that has to be done with this kid. His ability to, read defenses, his ability to get through his progressions quicker, to expand his vision as far as the field is concerned, to work on his mechanics, to drive the football instead of, floating the football in certain plays, the trajectory of his throws, his mechanics, his ability, to get the team in and out of there's a lot that has to be done, but I think he's earned the right. And I believe that Nick Sirianni honestly believes that he's earned the right to at least come back next year and try to get it right. And hey, if it doesn't work next year, then you start looking towards the future, whether that's a veteran down the road or a young quarterback. The only problem with a young quarterback now is that if you go and you bring in a young quarterback now, you're going to repeat this year all over again, because that young quarterback has got to go through all the machinations that Jalen Hurts has had to go through this year to get to where he is right now. And I don't care what quarterback you are, you're going to have some bad games here and there Tom Brady lost to the Saints 9-0. They didn't score any points. This is the defending Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl champion, and the guy that's, for all intents and purposes, could be back in the dance again. He's had his share of bad games this year, but it's magnified. It's Philadelphia. I get it.
Last thing for you, I know we're running long. If you have time, if I could just confirm or deny this story for me. I heard a story while you were playing. There was a bit of a contract dispute. Buddy Ryan actually called you and said, hey, look, Seth, you do what you got to do, get your money, but I got to act like a tough head coach. And he said some things in the media. Is that true? Was that kind of an orchestrated thing? Or is this something I just made up and grasping for straws here?
No, listen, he didn't necessarily call me. We had just got done, back in the day after, you had your mini camp. You had 2 mini camps. You had the post-draft mini camp, which was 3 days. And then you had a little mini camp, right before training camp started. So, I wasn't under contract, but back then, you showed up for all that stuff. These guys now, if they're not under contract, they won't come anywhere near the facility. So that last mini camp, he pulls me aside and he's like, hey, listen, the one thing that I ask is that when you sign the contract, you come in and you live up to the contract. He said, but because this is your time to make your money, you do what you got to do as long as it takes. He says, and I know them guys, they're going to try to give you the least amount of money that they can give you. But understand what my job is. I can't go to bat for you in the media. Okay. So there are some things that are going to be said, so on and so forth. He was like, just understand, I got to do my job, And listen, this is why you love Buddy, because you knew where you stood with him.
Uh-huh.
There was no BS. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. It was cut and dry. If I wasn't one of his guys, then he would have never said that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that gave me comfort. And I'm sitting at home. He's like, oh, that 59, he better get his ass in here because you know what? This guy is in his spot. He's playing lights out. And I'm sitting at home and I'm just giggling my ass off because I know what the heck is going on. So I sign my contract. I come in, before on that Wednesday before the first regular season game. And I'm standing over on the sideline. He looks at me. He's like, what the hell are you doing over here? Get your ass in there. You gotta love playing for a guy like that, man.
What a time, man. What a time to be an Eagles fan. Just watch that defense, of course. Seth Joyner, you're the man. As your first time guest on the Farzy Show, can't thank you enough. For those that don't know, it was such a pleasure working with you at NBC and the occasions we got to do that, brother. Make sure you guys check out his show, the Seth Joyner Show, across social media platforms, Twitter, YouTube, all of it. You guys can check that out. Also, make sure you guys just always check him out when he's on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Always talking Eagles defense, always talking Eagles, of course. And Merrill Reese will be a guest on the Seth Joyner Show, correct?
Tonight, in a couple of hours.
In a couple of hours. Look at you. I will let you go then.
7:30 Eastern time. We'll be chopping it up.
You don't do a Merrill Reese impression, do you?
I do, but I ain't do. I can't do it when asked. It's like a natural thing,
right? You have to be in the flow of it.
Yeah. He goes. I get it. He's like, for the Eagles, this is Merrill Reese.
Not bad. Not bad.
It's pretty good. I mean,
it's pretty good.
Sometimes it's better when it's like, when I hear him on the radio, and then I'll mock him right after, and it's like, man, that's pretty good. That sounds pretty good. Fantastic.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Seth Joyner. Check out his show, The Seth Joyner Show. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Catch him on NBC all the time as well. An Eagle Hall of Famer is all you really need to know, and Super Bowl champion Seth Joyner. Thank you, Seth.
Farzy, my pleasure, man. I got to get you on my show in the next couple of weeks. I'll be in contact.
I think I know my people. They'll say yes to that.
Awesome.
Seth Joyner, ladies and gentlemen, joining us on the Ruffin Orthopedics guest line.